Hello. It's 4:20. Let's get high. All right. So, you may have noticed that there is a new moon. And new moon means a new month to many, many peoples around the world who adjudicate time according to weeks and to months. 7-day weeks, basically a 12-month year. And I think like the Islamic calendar is a good example, because you see that by doing that, by going precisely by the month, that Ramadan happens all through the year. I forget when it was this year. It seems it was just earlier, a month or two. And fours in the summer. Every year it's in a different place in the calendar. And the reason is because there's a discrepancy between the cycle, the 19-year cycle of the moon and the 21-year cycle of the sun, which is interesting because 20 is because 10 is the tree of life, and male and female together it's 20. But we see that they're not equal. And and if one judges the year by the moon, by 12 months, then things will move throughout the year. Or like in the Roman calendar. In the Roman calendar, they go by the sun, and they have leap years, and that somehow makes things work. I don't quite understand how the leap year thing works. But and they go just by the sun. It doesn't matter, and that's why the moon, the new moon is happening in what day is it? It's the 14th. Yes, in the middle of July, June. Where are we? June. We're in the middle of June, and it's the new moon. What does the new moon do? Because they have no relation to one another. But the Jewish calendar is is kind of a combination of the two. Because we go according to the moon, no question about it. And this moon is called Tammuz, the moon of Tammuz. And yet we also have to adjust for the 21-year cycle of the sun, because one of the 613 commandments given to the Jewish people is to keep their holidays in their season. And we have two seasonal holidays, the big 2 7-day holidays of Sukkot and Pesach. And Sukkot always has to be in the fall. And Pesach always has to be in the spring. So in order to do that, every few years, probably the next year coming up, we haven't had one in a while, will be what's called a pregnant year, where we'll have a 13-month year. And the Jewish nation, we start our months from the spring, from the time of Passover. So the month before, March, is the last month of the year. And so sometimes we'll add two of them. It's called Adar. And you could have Adar Sheni, a second Adar, a second month. And a year has 13 months. And it's just obviously a longer year. Called a pregnant year. And then it goes back to regular years for, another 2-3 years. So it's not exact like it's a whole system that it's worked out, and it's actually how, children used to learn mathematics. was going through these ways of how figuring out what the months are and stuff like that. Very interesting stuff. And, if you're that kind of person really into mathematics and stuff, and how it, in time. And but anyways, and these names like Tammuz is an ancient name. We find it in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is like the first really written story that we know of. And it's hundreds of years before the Torah. It was right after the flood, and talks about the flood, and talks about these entities which would come down from heaven and take on form. And all this stuff is written also in the Torah, and particularly in the Zohar. And and all the months, all the 12 months, we know the names of them. But since Rome conquered the world, went out to conquer the world, destroyed Israel, and started calling everything by Roman mythology, which wasn't really Roman mythology anyways, because they just stole it from the Greeks and shaved the Greek gods, gave them different names, and basically, regurgitated the same story. And there's a reason why Rome is like this, and this month is really very much focused on Rome, because it's in this month, in the 17th of this month, that Rome broke through the walls, the outer walls in the city of Jerusalem, and began a 3-week march until they got to the temple, and on the 9th day of Av burned down the temple. And Josephus, the famous historian, who was there with the Roman army, was actually a Jewish historian, but he'd gone over to the other side and became the historian for the king. And he was there, he witnessed it, and writes things about it. And watched as the temple was burnt, even though it was made out of stone. It was made out of limestone, and when you get limestone hot, it burns. And that wasn't the end, but that was certainly the beginning of the Jewish people being thrown out into exile and having their land called Palestine, over the people that we had shared the land with for, more than 1,000 years. Gave it to them and said, there's no more Jews, it's your land. And there's a reason why Rome does these kind of things. And but to really understand Rome in its essence, you really have to go back to the father of Rome. And the father of Rome is the twin brother of Yisrael, of Yaakov. When they were born twins. And but they were very different. Yaakov was a very normal, soft, normal baby, but Esav, the reason they called him Esav is because he was a Sui. He was already made. He was like a little tiny human being who had a beard and had teeth, and it says that he bit his mother on the way out, and she never gave birth again. Because of that, she wasn't her favorite child. Yaakov was. And they called him Yaakov because when the two children came out, Yaakov was holding on to Esau's foot, trying to restrain him. A very odd story. It's not the way babies are born now, but you have to understand that, each generation becomes more physical than the one before it. And back then, people were quite ephemeral. and all sorts of strange things could happen, and people were not exactly the way they are now, and babies were born with much more intelligence and capabilities, and even in the womb they were fighting over who would be the firstborn. And it shows so much on the nature of Esau. And Esau eventually becomes the progenitor of the Roman people, the father of Rome. And this is called the 2,000-year exile of Esau. And who is Esau? Esau's that dude who is fighting to get out first. He wants to get out first. So important, man. He should be first. Why did he think it was important to be first? Because he saw that Yaakov wanted to be first. So if Yaakov wanted to be first, then Esau would be first instead. And they fought in the womb. There's stories that, when their mother, Rivka, would pass by like a place where people were studying, the truth. The Torah hadn't been given yet, but there was lots of things that, people knew and people studied, and there were books. And so she would feel this kicking, wanting to get out. And sometimes she would walk by a place where they served idols, where they just, tried to manipulate heaven to get what they wanted. And again, kicking to get out. So she went to a wise man. She says, what's going on? And I got a psychotic child here. One wants to both learn the truth and also serve the idol. So he says, no, you got twins. And that's how it was, that one was like really devoted into the truth. And the other one was really into power. And we see that Abraham dies, passes away, and Yaakov hears the news, or is there, and he goes out and he's making a porridge because out of lentils, because as a way to mourn. As to it, the way the lentil looks like a mouth, there's different things. Even to today, people like eat eggs as a sign of mourning because it has no mouth. There's nothing to say. Someone dies, what are you going to say? There's just really nothing to say. I'll say the same thing. I'm sorry, but there's nothing to say. So by eating these things, we sort of way of acknowledging there's really nothing to say. It's just an experience. And Esau comes by. It's a very odd story, a very prominent story in the Torah, that Esau comes by and he says, I'm famished, I'm almost dead, give me something to eat, else I'm going to die. But where did he come from? Suddenly, he appears. So Yaakov makes him promise that he will sell him the firstborn. That Esau came out first, and he got the firstborn, but Yaakov wanted it, and he still wants it. So either you can live, I'll feed you, or you'll die. So Esau says, what do you get by being the first? And like he really wanted it, but he didn't really know, what he was. So, I got it, but so what? So Yaakov explains to him. Later, when the Torah is given, you are going to be the head dude. And if you make the slightest mistake, you're going to die. That's how the law is. Particularly on day of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, when God forgives all the sins, the Kohen Gadol, the highest person, goes into the Holy of Holies, where the 10 Commandments are, and puts incense there and prays for the people. And if he has one bad thought, that he dies. And it got to be later, towards the end of the temple, when everything was getting very corrupted, that people would, a rich person would say, I want to do it. Even though he knew that he would probably die, but he wanted the experience. So like people now, they want to go up into outer space just for the experience, And you wanted the experience. He was rich. He did everything. You know, he wanted the experience. And you go in. So they had to start. You know, putting like a golden chain on the guy's leg because no one was allowed to go in there. And if he died, you know, what are you going to do? Have to wait till next year. I mean, it's not the whole thing. Yeah, you know, isn't going to work. So they put a chain on their leg, so if they died in there, they could drag them out. And I forget why I was saying all of this. Yes. Anyways, so I remember. So Esav said, I don't want that, man. Give me something to eat. And because the porridge was red, so people still started calling him Edom. Edom means red. And the planet Mars is also called Edom, Edom mean or something like that. I forget. And he has a connection with Mars, and Mars is the planet of war, and its severity. We see that in the redness and the blood. And Esav, besides being completely made, but he had very red skin, and you know, it's just a side point. I hope I don't forget where I'm at. But later he has a son. What's his name? Alifat, something like that. I can't remember. Maybe I shouldn't tell the story. I can almost Alipas. I don't know. Maybe. Anyways, he has this son. At one point, Esav tells his son, "Go kill Yaakov." So he goes to kill Yaakov. He reaches him, but he doesn't want to kill him because it's his uncle. So Yaakov says, "Take all my money, because a poor man's like a dead man. That way you can do what your father said, and also leave me alive." So that's what he does. And it says because of this, Alipaz gets 1,000, a place of 1,000 nations as an inheritance. And sometimes I wonder if that's where the Native Americans get their redness from. They certainly were a nation, you know, they were a country of like 1,000 nations, all these little nations here. And these people who came from Abraham were very big dudes. So particularly in the first generation, that they really affected things. And but in the end, we see that Esav's the kind of person that he just wants, he wants to have it. He wants to win. He likes struggle. See, and that's why if you look at the Roman Empire, which are always selling as like Western civilization, but it's really, it's the Western, it's the Roman Empire took over the Western part of the world. And, with their laws and their religion and their money and their whole thing. And the way they rule the world is through fighting. They're always making fights. And instead of cooperating, they would rather make a fight. I'm going to close the door. Well, that's a little bit better. Because Rome lives by the sword, and Rome loves to fight because they're good at it. So sure, you'd want to let's decide who's right by fighting, because they're more likely to win. And that's how their justice system is. It's called I can't remember it. That's a term, where they fight with each other, and the judge is just there as a referee. So it's sort of like a baseball game or a football game, and the two sides fight it out, and whoever wins, that's justice. And this is based on the fact that Rome like lives by the sword and just wants to win. And certainly, we see that now in our own, Congress, in the person of this. I don't know if he's really a man, I think he's really some sort of entity. He comes down. They talk about this in the Zohar. These entities come down and take on physical appearance, but they have no compassion. That's how you know who they are, that they're not real human beings, And certainly this bitch McConnell fits that one. A man who's just against anything that would help anyone except for making money. And certainly this is a huge problem in America, but now it's a huge problem for everybody because, they're not sure that they can get Americans to get back on the train. It's like another train to a death camp. And, over the death camp, famous in Auschwitz, it said, work will make you free. And that's become America, even to the point where governors now are holding back on money that helps people because they want to pressure people going into jobs that they don't want to work at. And this is this coercion is like a type of slavery. And we need to stay strong about this. And we need to really help one another. And we really need to insist that our states take a stronger stand against the federal government, who are obviously not our friends, and they're the only ones who can run these deficits up, and they don't have to pay for anything. The people are going to pay for it. Like these two pricks going to the moon. See which one can be the first one to ejaculate on the moon. Why? Because they want to. The same reason that Bill Clinton got a blowjob in the Oval Office. They asked him and he said, because I could. He doesn't give a shit what it does to the country or to other people. He only took the opportunity to do whatever he wanted to do. And I'm sure that was, the least of things that he did. And we're always pushing ourselves up that we're this great democracy. And to me, it's looking like we're the most corrupt nation in the world. Because, when you got, these billionaires who are, they're booking flights on a 5-minute rocket trip for millions of dollars, like $30 million, while the populace is living out in the fucking streets. And no one cares. And maybe they're going to make some sort of commission to look into it. And how many people are going to die and go crazy and become, violent and steal because, the human being, you can only take so much. And for all the terrible things that we say about China, we're so worried about China and Russia. They're at the G7 and they're all, how are we going to protect ourselves against China? What are we protecting ourselves against? That we want to stay dominant. And that's not right. That's not what America is. America is not America the dominant. It's America the beautiful. And the reason why America is beautiful is because we represent every peoples in the world. And everyone can, have their foods and share their culture and it's like a little world America. But we have certain people or a certain group of people who they think that they can make America the strongest country in in the world, and then we can tell all the other countries what to do, like we got it together, and we don't got it together. I mean, we're just polluted with religion and people who are dogmatic, to the point of, I mean, it's absurdity. You can understand why in China they don't like religion. They see what it did in the rest of the world, and China has 1.5 billion people, and you could probably count on one hand how many people are homeless in China. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I mean, you never hear about the homeless people in China. And the Chinese have each country, and particularly each section in the world, has a different nature. And the nature of the Chinese is when the emperor, the head of the country, says something, everyone does it. We see, even though they had this outbreak, that's where the outbreak began, but they were able to shut it down very quickly because the people did what they were told. And because of that, many people's lives were saved. In America, where we have freedom of speech and freedom of expression, so, we lost in percentage wise, much more, who knows how many times more, what is 600,000 to, of a 300 billion people is like, well, what, 2% or something? I don't know, I'm just doing it on the fly, and I'm sure whatever China lost was 0.0% of something. And that's where, this kind of thing comes in handy. But, there are drawbacks to it. You don't have as much personal freedom. But from my recollection, looking at China for like 70 years, seeing it as a kid of a place that didn't even go on the map, and where everyone was dying for starvation. I remember being told at the table I had to eat my food because the people in China were starving. I couldn't imagine why me eating food could help the people in China. And my response was, give it to the Chinese. I don't want it. Anyways, and in these 70 years, look what China has done. It's amazing. Oh, all right. They have their ideas of how they think their area in the world should be operating. And that's always going to cause some consternation with some of the island people and stuff like that. And certainly that's something that they need to work out. But America doesn't need to be there. All America wants is to make another war so we can sell more weapons and we can fuck everything up so there's more that we can monetize. Because that's, in the end, is all these dudes are about, is monetizing shit. If you get sick, they're going to figure out how to monetize you. Everything is about monetization. Someone said something. The vaccine is getting injected a synthetic gene into people's body. Doesn't that have some biblical reference or moral essence that created in creation, which was us and our holy DNA? Well, not to sound like Vladimir Putin, but show me the evidence. I mean, people keep making these stories up, these horrible stories that would be extremely difficult. I mean, this isn't some movie and some plot where you can just, throw something in. It has to be done and no one can know about it. And you're going to do something that's evil. You get just a bunch of evil people and you're going to tell anybody else, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Once you have proof, all right. But other than that, this is something, it's sort of like insurance. Everyone buys insurance. So if something happens to one person, there's enough money, to help that person. And the vaccine is very similar to that. We know a certain percentage of people are going to get sick, a very small percentage. Maybe someone might even die. But the amount of people who are not going to die and not going to get sick just overwhelms. I mean, nothing, is perfect. But the people who say these things without any, I mean, one of the things about Torah, you just can't say shit because you cannot contradict the written Torah in any way. So the whole Torah, the Talmud, the Medrash, the Zohar, whatever it says can never contradict what's written in the written Torah. It can only explain it. If it contradicts, we throw it out. So this is like a contradiction. There's a contradiction to everything we know in this world, that people don't do this. Just people, they have these dramas going on inside of their heads and think, well, anything's possible. Anything's not possible. That's really not possible that people can do this kind of stuff. We know, everything in the Talmud has a voice. We know people do shit we know. And, it's not you get one scientist who can do something, but you can get a whole bunch of people and all this instrumentation. No one's going to know what they're doing. Doesn't make any sense. And nobody, I mean, I think it was a big fear in the 90s when everyone worried that Gates would take over, whatever his name is, something Gates, but Bill Gates will take over the only operating system there'll be will have to go through him. And that was very dangerous. And I think Apple is the one who really came up and a real hero and did something greater than he did. And now it is the best operating system. And now you have competition. People want to do like cheaper things or whatever, the Bill Gates, but you have competition. Competition is good in business. It's good in sports, but it's not good in living. We don't want to be competing with one another, who has the most money, who has the most things, who has the most, anything. We want to love one another. That's the human being. That's what we do. We have compassion. We have love. Those are things that mean something in this world and the next world. The rest of it is just bullshit. All right. I went over my time, but someone asked me a question. So I just want to say, please visit my website, dovidhouse.com. And I invite you to buy a book, take a course, do something cool. Say hi, say happy. See you tomorrow, 420. Bye.